Late one evening, the streets of Moscow were cold and quiet. The city lights flickered on the wet pavement as cars rushed past, their headlights cutting through the darkness. Among them was a sleek black motorcade moving smoothly through the streets. Inside the main car sat Vladimir Putin, the president of Russia, deep in thought as he looked out of the window. His mind was occupied with the matters of the state, meetings and decisions that shaped the country. As the car slowed down at a traffic signal, his sharp eyes noticed something unusual on the side of the street. A woman sat on the hard pavement, huddled in a worn-out coat. Beside her were two small children, their tiny bodies wrapped in thin blankets that did little to protect them from the biting cold. The children leaned against their mother, their faces pale, their eyes filled with exhaustion and hunger. For a brief moment, Putin just observed. The streets were always filled with people, some walking home, others enjoying the nightlife. But this sight was different. There was something about the way the woman held her children close, as if she were trying to shield them from the cruel world around them. A deep sadness lingered in her eyes, a silent plea for help that no one seemed to notice. The light turned green, and the driver prepared to move forward. But Putin raised a hand. "Stop the car," he said firmly. The guards exchanged uneasy glances. It was rare for him to make unexpected stops, especially without security precautions. But they obeyed without question, and the car came to a slow halt at the side of the road. The sudden presence of the motorcade caught the attention of pedestrians nearby. Some slowed down to see what was happening, while others kept walking, uninterested. The homeless woman, however, tensed up. She had seen important-looking cars before, but none had ever stopped for someone like her. She held her children tighter, as if preparing for trouble. Putin stepped out of the car, his black coat shielding him from the cold as he walked toward the woman. His security team followed closely behind, their eyes scanning the surroundings. The woman looked up, her lips trembling as she recognized the familiar face before her. She had only seen him on television, a man of power, a leader of millions. But why was he standing in front of her now? For a moment, there was silence. The children clung to their mother's arms, too weak to react. Putin studied the woman's face, noticing the deep lines of hardship. Then, in a calm voice, he asked, "What is your name?" The woman hesitated, unsure if she should speak. No one had asked for her name in a long time, but something in his voice made her feel that for once, someone truly wanted to listen. Taking a shaky breath, she whispered her name. Putin nodded, his expression unreadable. Then he asked another question, one that would change everything. "How did you end up here?" The woman hesitated for a moment. She lowered her eyes, as if ashamed to answer. Her fingers tightened around her children's small hands, as if drawing strength from them. The cold wind brushed against her face, but she barely noticed. Finally, in a weak voice, she spoke. "I had a home once," she said, her voice trembling. "A small apartment. My husband worked as a construction worker. He was a good man, a hard worker. We didn't have much, but we had enough." She paused for a moment, as if remembering those better days. Her lips trembled, and her eyes glistened with unused tears. Putin listened in silence. His expression remained serious, but his eyes held curiosity. He could tell she was struggling to find the right words, but he did not rush her. "Then, one day, my husband had an accident at work," she continued. "It happened so fast. They said he fell from the scaffolding. They took him to the hospital, but he didn't make it." Her voice cracked as she spoke the last words. She turned her face away, trying to hide her pain. Her children looked up at her, their innocent faces not fully understanding the weight of their mother's words. The younger one, a little boy, tugged at her sleeve, sensing her sadness but not knowing how to comfort her. Putin remained still, letting her continue. "After that, everything fell apart," she said. "The landlord told me I had to leave because I couldn't pay rent. I tried to find work, but no one wanted to hire a woman with 2 small children. I begged for help, but people just turned away. I sold everything I had, but it was never enough. In the end, I had nowhere to go. She looked down at her children, brushing a strand of hair away from her daughter's face. I tried to keep them safe, she whispered. Tried to keep them warm. But it gets harder every day. For a moment, there was silence between them. The sound of passing cars and distant voices filled the air. But in this small corner of the street, time seemed to stand still. Putin looked at the children. Their faces were thin, their clothes old and torn. The little girl clung to her mother's side, her eyes tired but filled with trust. She didn't know the man standing in front of her, but she sensed that something was different about him. Putin turned his gaze back to the woman. "You have no family?" he asked. She shook her head. "No one left," she whispered. He was quiet for a moment, thinking. The cold wind howled through the streets, but he barely felt it. Then, in a firm voice, he spoke. "You won't stay here anymore." The woman looked up, confused. "What do you mean?" she asked. Putin turned to his security team and gave an order that would change her life forever. The woman stared at Putin in disbelief. His words echoed in her mind. "You won't stay here anymore." She wanted to believe it, but after all the struggles she had been through, hope felt like a distant dream. She had seen many people walk past her, pretending not to notice. Some had even given her pitying looks, but no one had ever stopped to help. Why would this man, one of the most powerful leaders in the world, be any different? Putin turned to one of his security officers and spoke in a firm, commanding voice. "Find a hotel nearby. Make sure they have a warm place to stay tonight. Arrange food and medical care for them immediately." The officer nodded and stepped away to make the arrangements. The woman's eyes widened as she processed what was happening. Her heart pounded in her chest. Was this real? Could she really trust that this man, whom she had only seen on television, was going to help her and her children? She clutched her little boy's hand tightly. "Why? Why are you doing this?" she whispered, her voice barely audible over the sound of passing cars. Putin looked at her, his expression calm but serious. "Because no mother and her children should be left on the streets," he said simply. There was no need for long explanations. To him, it was a decision that needed no second thought. Just then, another car pulled up. One of the guards opened the door and gestured for the woman and her children to get inside. She hesitated, looking at her children. The little girl, sensing her mother's uncertainty, tugged at her sleeve. "Mama, warm?" she asked softly, her voice full of hope. The woman felt tears sting her eyes. For so long, she had tried to be strong. She had shielded her children from the cold, from hunger, from the harsh reality of life. And now, for the first time in a long time, someone was offering help. Real help. She nodded slowly, then with trembling hands, she lifted her daughter and guided her son into the warm car. The seats were soft, the warmth inside comforting. She sank into the seat, her body relaxing slightly for the first time in months. The security officer sat in the front, speaking into a radio, making further arrangements. The car started moving, leaving behind the cold streets that had been her home for so long. As she looked out of the window, she saw Putin standing there, watching as the car drove away. He had already turned toward his own vehicle, ready to continue his night, as if this act of kindness was just another decision in his busy life. The woman held her children close, her heart filled with emotions she couldn't describe. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time in a long time, she dared to hope. The car moved through the streets of Moscow, the city lights reflecting off the windows. Inside, the woman sat in silence, holding her children close. The warmth of the car felt almost unreal after so many cold nights on the streets. Her daughter rested her head against her shoulder, her tiny body finally relaxing. Her son, though still awake, kept looking around with wide eyes, as if he too couldn't believe this was real. The woman stole a glance at the security officer sitting in the front. He was busy speaking into a radio, confirming arrangements for their stay. She wanted to ask where they were going, but she was too afraid that speaking would break the illusion. What if this was just a dream? What if, any moment now, she would wake up on the cold pavement with nothing but her thin blanket? The car slowed down and turned onto a quiet street. Ahead, she saw a brightly lit building with large glass windows, a hotel. The sight of it made her chest tighten. She had passed by such places before, looking inside at people who had warm meals and soft beds. Never had she imagined she would step inside one. The car stopped, and the officer turned around. "Come," he said gently. His voice was not unkind, but it was firm, as if he was used to giving instructions. She hesitated for a second, then slowly stepped out, carrying her daughter in her arms while her son held onto her coat. The cold night air hit her skin, but it no longer felt unbearable. She was no longer alone in the darkness. As they entered the hotel lobby, warmth wrapped around them. The golden glow of the lights, the soft carpet beneath her worn-out shoes. It was all overwhelming. A woman in a neat uniform approached with a polite smile, though there was a hint of surprise in her eyes. She had clearly not expected to see a homeless woman and her children step inside, escorted by a government security team. "They will be staying here for the night," the officer said to the hotel manager. "Ensure they have food and any necessities they need." The manager nodded quickly. "Of course," she said. The woman was led to a room on one of the upper floors. When the door opened, she gasped. The room was bigger than the small apartment she had once lived in. A large bed with soft white blankets, a bathroom with running water, and a small table with plates of warm food waiting for them. Her son ran to the bed and touched the blankets with wonder. "Mama." "Soft," he whispered, as if he couldn't believe it. She covered her mouth with her hand, her body shaking. Was this really happening? After so many nights of hunger and suffering, was this kindness truly meant for her? A knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. A hotel worker stood there with a tray of hot soup, bread, and milk for the children. "Eat," she said kindly. "You are safe here." Tears welled in the woman's eyes as she guided her children to the table. For the first time in months, they would sleep without fear. The warm smell of soup filled the room as the woman helped her children settle at the small table. Their tiny hands reached eagerly for the bread, their hunger overpowering their manners. She watched as they took quick bites, their little faces lighting up with relief and joy. For the first time in so long, they weren't eating scraps from the street. They had real food, fresh, warm, and enough to fill their stomachs. She hesitated before picking up her own spoon. The feeling of comfort was unfamiliar, almost frightening. What if this was temporary? What if by morning they would be asked to leave and return to the cold streets? She pushed the thought away and took a slow sip of the soup. The warmth spread through her body, soothing her in a way she hadn't felt in a long time. Her daughter, now full, rubbed her sleepy eyes. "Mama." "Sleepy," she murmured. The woman reached out and brushed her fingers gently through her daughter's hair. "Go lie down, my love," she whispered. The little girl crawled onto the bed, burying herself in the soft blankets. Her son followed, his small body sinking into the mattress. Within minutes, both children were fast asleep, their breathing steady, their faces peaceful. The woman sat still, watching them. For months, they had slept on hard pavements, in dark alleys, or under old, thin blankets that barely kept the cold away. They had shivered through the nights, waking up tired and aching. But tonight was different. Tonight, they were safe, warm, and resting without fear. A soft knock at the door made her turn. The security officer from earlier stood there, a serious but calm expression on his face. "Do you need anything?" he asked. She shook her head quickly. "No, this is more than enough," she said, her voice thick with emotion. He nodded. "Tomorrow morning, someone will come to speak with you," he said. "They will help you with the next steps." The woman swallowed hard. The next steps. What did that mean? Would she be sent away? Would this kindness end as suddenly as it had come? Sensing her worry, the officer added, "You don't have to live on the streets anymore." Her lips trembled, and she looked away, trying to hold back her tears. "Thank you," she whispered. Those 2 words didn't seem enough to express what she felt, but they were all she had. The officer gave a small nod and closed the door, leaving her alone with her thoughts. She sat by the window for a long time, staring at the city outside. The streets that had once been her prison now seemed distant, as if they belonged to another life. A single tear rolled down her cheek, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming realization that for the first time in a long time, she had hope. And this time, she dared to believe that maybe, just maybe, things would finally change. The morning sun streamed through the curtains, casting a warm glow over the room. The woman blinked her eyes open, confused for a moment. The softness beneath her, the warmth around her, it felt unfamiliar. Then, as her mind cleared, she remembered. They were no longer on the streets. They had spent the night in a real bed, under a real roof. She turned her head to see her children still fast asleep, their faces peaceful. Her heart swelled at the sight. For the first time in months, they had slept without shivering, without fear of being woken up by the harshness of the streets. A gentle knock at the door made her sit up. She quickly checked her children before walking to open it. A well-dressed woman stood outside, holding a clipboard. Behind her, a hotel worker carried a tray of breakfast: fresh bread, eggs, fruit, and warm milk for the children. "Good morning," the woman said with a kind smile. "I am here to help you. May I come in?" The homeless woman hesitated for a moment, but then nodded and stepped aside. The visitor entered and gestured for her to sit down. The hotel worker placed the tray on the table and left, while the woman with the clipboard settled into a chair across from her. "I understand that you have been struggling," the woman said gently. "I am from a government organization that helps families in need. Mr. Putin has arranged for us to assist you in rebuilding your life." The homeless woman's eyes widened in shock. She had thought the kindness she received last night was temporary, but now she realized it wasn't just a one-time act. The president himself had taken action to change her situation completely. What does that mean?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The official smiled reassuringly. "It means you will no longer have to live on the streets. We have arranged a temporary apartment for you and your children. It is small, but it is warm and safe. You will also receive help finding a job so you can take care of your family." Tears welled up in the woman's eyes. "An apartment," she repeated, as if trying to believe the words. "Yes," the woman confirmed. "And your children will be taken care of. We will make sure they have proper clothes, food, and medical attention. They will also be able to go to school." At the mention of school, the homeless woman's heart tightened. She had dreamed of giving her children an education, a future better than her own. But that dream had seemed impossible, until now. She covered her face with her hands as silent tears fell. She had prayed for a miracle, but she had never expected something like this. The official reached out and gently patted her shoulder. "You are not alone anymore," she said softly. For the first time, in a long time, the homeless woman believed those words. A new chapter of her life was about to begin. The woman wiped her tears, still struggling to believe what she had just heard. A home, a job, a future for her children. It felt like a dream, one she was afraid to wake up from. Her son stirred on the bed, rubbing his sleepy eyes. "Mama," he mumbled, looking around the bright room. His little sister woke up too, stretching her tiny arms. Their mother rushed to them, hugging them tightly. "We are safe," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Everything is going to be okay now." The woman from the government organization gave them time to eat before explaining the next steps. "A car will take you to your new home today," she said kindly. "It's not big, but it's clean and warm. You will also meet a social worker who will help you find work." The homeless woman nodded quickly, still overwhelmed. "I will work hard," she said firmly. "I just want to take care of my children." The official smiled. "That's all we want, to help you stand on your own feet again." After breakfast, the woman and her children were given new clothes. The little girl giggled as she twirled in her clean dress, and the boy ran his fingers over his warm jacket, smiling brightly. Seeing them so happy made their mother's heart ache with gratitude. Soon, the same black car that had brought them to the hotel was waiting outside. As they stepped in, the woman turned back to look at the hotel one last time. This was where her life had changed. The drive to their new home was quiet. The woman held her children close, still afraid that all of this would disappear. But when they arrived, she gasped. The apartment building was simple but well kept. The entrance was clean, and a few children were playing outside. For the first time in months, she wasn't looking at dark alleyways or cold street corners. She was looking at a place where families lived, where people had a chance to build their lives. A kind-looking woman was waiting for them. "Welcome," she said warmly. "Come inside." The apartment was small, but it was cozy. There was a kitchen, a small living room, and a bedroom. There was even a soft bed for the children and a table where they could sit and eat together. The homeless woman ran her fingers over the clean furniture, struggling to hold back her emotions. This is mine," she asked in disbelief. The official nodded. "Yes, this is your home now." Her son jumped onto the bed, laughing. "Mama, so soft," he cheered. Her daughter hugged her leg, her tiny voice full of happiness. "Mama, no cold." The mother knelt down, holding both of her children close. "No, my love," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "No more cold." For the first time in so long, she knew they would never have to sleep on the streets again. Hope had finally found its way into their lives. The woman sat on the small couch in her new home, watching her children play on the soft carpet. Their laughter filled the room, a sound she had not heard in so long. Just days ago, they had been cold and hungry on the streets. Now they had a warm place to sleep, food to eat, and a future that no longer seemed impossible. A knock on the door made her stand quickly. She still wasn't used to having a home where someone could knock and visit. When she opened the door, she saw the same kind woman from the government organization, holding some papers and a warm smile. "I hope you are settling in well," the woman said. "I came to discuss the next steps." The homeless woman nodded and invited her inside. She still felt nervous whenever someone spoke about the future, afraid that all of this could be taken away. The official sat down and placed the papers on the table. "We have found a few job options for you," she said. "We will provide training so you can start working soon. This will help you become independent and take care of your children." The homeless woman took a deep breath. "I will do anything," she said firmly. "I just want to give my children a good life." The official smiled. "That is exactly why we are here to help." As they continued talking, the woman learned that she would receive financial support until she could fully stand on her own. The children would be enrolled in a school nearby, where they could learn and grow like any other kids. They would also receive medical checkups to ensure they were healthy. The homeless woman's heart swelled with gratitude. She had spent so long believing that no one cared, that she was invisible to the world. But now, everything was changing. After the official left, she sat quietly for a moment, processing everything. Then she walked over to her children, pulling them into a warm embrace. "My loves, you will go to school," she told them softly. "You will have books, friends, and a future." Her son's eyes lit up. "School? Like other kids?" "Yes," she nodded, smiling through her tears. Her daughter clapped her little hands. "Mama happy?" The mother kissed her forehead. "Yes, my love. Mama is very happy." That night, after putting her children to sleep, she sat by the window, looking out at the city lights. It was the same city she had walked through in fear and hunger, but now it felt different. It was a place of new beginnings. She thought of the moment everything had changed, the moment a powerful man had stopped, looked at her, and decided to help. That single act of kindness had saved her and her children. With a deep breath, she wiped her tears. Tomorrow was a new day, And for the first time in a long time, she wasn't afraid of it. She was ready to rebuild her life.